the Sadli lecture. And always remember Pak Sadli, of course. He was the eternal optimist, as Khatib Basri was just saying earlier. And he was a mentor, I guess, to many of us, or all of us. And you remember his morning calls, right? He would call us if there's an issue or something he's been thinking about. He'll call you around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And then we'll have a long conversation, and then it will appear in the business news editorial probably the next day. So he was someone who always was thinking about economics, and not just in the academic sense, but always in the policy sense. And he always liked a good debate, so I think he would have been, if he was here today, he would have enjoyed our session. Now I have a difficult job to comment on Dede or Khatib Basri's paper. It's an excellent paper and very comprehensive. And as a teacher, I think the best satisfaction for a teacher is when your student becomes better than you. So I really highly appreciate the work he's done. I mean, I have a few students, other students in the room here today, and all of you are better than the teacher. And I think it's very rare you have someone with very strong academic background who was also the policy maker at the time when this 2013 taper tantrum was being made. So I think we have had a very good insight, not just from an academic analysis, but also from the one who was intimately involved with the policy making. So I would like to just perhaps ask a few questions and to enrich the paper. And probably my strength today is no longer kind of questioning the academic side of it. I will let Reza do that. I will like to more focus on the policy issues and the political economy issues. So just a couple of questions on kind of the way we try to think about why some countries fared better and some countries was more impacted by the taper tantrum. And some of it is related to the precondition of the country. If you read a lot of the analysis on this, what happened during the taper tantrum, you mentioned a few, like the currency appreciation, the exposure to resources, whether you're a commodity exporter or importer. But I just wanted to add maybe 3 more that you didn't really mention, which is mentioned in other discussions about taper tantrum. One is the precondition of a country of whether their ability to have tighter capital controls. In the sense that if you could have imposed a kind of a Tobin tax or any kind of policy that will influence the type of capital inflow that comes into your country, then you might have had less exposure to portfolio flows compared to the case. And I think the numbers actually show China had more FDI than portfolio, but that's because China had controls. And then Mexico was also used, the Latin American countries actually had kind of almost the same amount of FDI and portfolio. The Asian countries were the one who had a huge amount of portfolio compared to FDI, and that is related to their ability to use some kind of capital control mechanisms. And the question here is actually kind of a policy question too. I kind of recall, I don't remember exactly the dates, whether it was preceding the taper tantrum or it was right during it. I remember Bank Indonesia tried, they call it sand in the wheels or something like that. They tried to introduce policies that will influence the short-term flows, whether coming in or going out. But I recall that they didn't actually implement it. And it would be interesting to know whether it was, in the times that whenever we talk about how to manage short-term capital flows, in the case of Indonesia, it's always, because we are supposed to have bebas devisa, it's always, and as soon as you try to do anything, people think, oh, we can't do it because the law does not allow us to do bebas devisa. Or you are afraid that people are going to interpret this as the beginning of capital controls. And then you may actually induce capital outflow. I don't know how much of that is still true, but that's just a question. The second precondition is is kind of a growth story. Growth and the prospect for growth is also a factor, I guess, in the taper tantrum story. And China, how much China slowdown in that time also played a factor, and the exposure of countries to China, like Indonesia, is obviously very exposed to China, whether that was a factor or not. And the third one is the depth of the domestic financial market or foreign exchange market. Because the case that was given as an example was Mexico. Mexico was less hard hit, even though of course Mexico had a lower current account deficit, because they had the ability to switch because of the depth of the domestic financial and foreign exchange market. So those are kind of just like questions. And I also had kind of a question, the whole issue about what is high or low in terms of the current account deficit over GDP. Is that still an important question or not? I mean, you said that, okay, maybe we don't have to worry about a lot of people think we don't have to worry about the current account deficit as a percentage of GDP. But obviously, what do you call them? Your common creditors, they do look at it. And in the good old days, before the Asian financial crisis, if I'm not mistaken, we used to use 5%, right? 5% current account deficit over GDP was safe, and I think 20% of foreign debt over GDP was safe. Those are kind of rule of thumb before the Asian financial crisis. After the Asian financial crisis, people said, oh, it's more vulnerable, etc., etc. But what was the number? I mean, if I look at your table 1, it seems that you're assuming it's 3%. Yeah? Is that 3% something that comes out of just a rule of thumb or common creditors? Were we? I remember. I think it was you yourself during that time. You said we were being unfairly punished. Yes, it was growing, but were we unfairly punished or not? I mean, that's just a question. What's the thinking on this? Okay, so that's kind of like kind of questions on the taper tantrum story. I'd like to now talk a little bit about policy responses and lessons learned. I think one lesson learned from what you were discussing is the importance of policy coordination between monetary and fiscal policy. I mean, you kind of had this story where, okay, the fiscal policy, maybe fuel subsidy was a bit late in coming, but then it came. So you had the expander switching and the expander reduction, but the monetary policy was perhaps late. Yeah, we always said that they were behind the curve in raising the interest rate compared to India, and that's why India fared better. So that's a question of the coordination between fiscal and monetary policy, and that's lesson learned, I think. And then on the upside, I think we also lowered our interest rate slower than India. So again, was that an issue on the other side of it? And I also think this is kind of more a political economy question. And that's another one of your favorite subjects. You didn't kind of touch on it at all in this presentation. And one question I had was, the currency appreciation that happened during preceding the taper tantrum. If I recall correctly, there was kind of a mistaken belief, perhaps, or what would you call it? A wish or a mistaken belief, perhaps, that if you had a strong currency, that was good. And that went all the way up to the top leadership. So the question is kind of how independent was the central bank in the way they acted in terms of the allowing intervening so that the currency would be strong, when actually they should have allowed it to depreciate more. How much of that was a political economy issue as well, given the outlook of perhaps the government? Yeah, okay. Central bank is supposed to be independent, but government also is there. And interest rate is the same question, actually. How much of it, the reluctance to raise the interest rate because of the fear that it's going to have some reaction from banks, from domestic players, and so on. The other thing I wanted to ask also was, I think another lesson learned is how you announce policies, all the way from Bernanke, who you just explained. Actually, he was not prepared in answering the question that was posed to him in Congress, and what he said had a huge impact, right? So central bank governors and ministers of finance have to be very careful in what they say. And And it can also explain, it's not just the Bernankes of the world. And if you look at the Feds, probably somebody's already doing this analysis. What, from the first time he said it, and then they kept on trying to say it, but they didn't actually do it. And then until the time when they kept on saying, okay, we will do it when the unemployment is lower and when the inflation is lower. And they just kept on having parameters, and people kept on predicting it. And I remember a conversation I had with Reza actually in 2015. So when you talk about the 2015 story, besides the maybe the lack of policy reform and so on, I think it was you who told me Thailand did better than us because they were able to explain the situation better than us. Yeah? So the messenger is very important in the way it influences market, especially when the market has incomplete information, doesn't have any clue too much about Indonesia and so on. So the way you announce things and explain things become very important. I think that, to me, that's another important lesson learned. It's that credibility point that Mbak Ani was making earlier. The other thing I would say is that what can we say about bad times leading to good policies? I think I remember when we were talking about this in 2013, you said this exactly to me, and at that time I was no longer where I could have had some influence on trade policy, but you said, don't worry, but I'm trying to do bad times leading to good policies by undertaking the reforms. So the reforms that were undertaken were not just because of the inflation issue, but it was supposed to be a signal to show that we are undertaking the economic reforms that will lead to a better basis for growth and so on, right? So that, I think, is another important lesson which goes beyond the macro policy, and it's related to the credibility point that Mbak Ani was making earlier. And I actually recall that you tried to do investment reforms as well, but I'm not sure they went down well or not, and I just wondered whether you want to share whether, what was the situation then that made it more or less difficult for us to be able to announce the right policy reforms. And I think in 2015, why India did better, the perception that India at the time anyway was actually doing more reforms than Indonesia. So it would be interesting to ask the question today, now, we are facing again a normalization of the interest rate. How does India and Indonesia compare? The last thing I would ask is about global cooperation. I think, what can we say about the importance of global cooperation? You did mention about the importance of Belarus swap, and you mentioned asking Bernanke at the G20 meeting, you should, when you talk, you should think about the impact on us. And the answer was, get your own house in order. That's not not an encouraging answer for the issue of policy coordination. So the question is more about what is the role of G20 in policy coordination, or UMRO, or IMF surveillance, or whatever it is. Because if you think about it, that was maybe Bernanke answered in that way because he felt that maybe everybody was ganging up on him at the time because of what happened was a huge impact that he did not expect because it was not normal time. But he should think about it. If what they did actually created a lot of global volatility, it's going to come back and hit the US again, right? So policy coordination is still important. And it's not just the way you say it, it's what you do and how you do it in a concerted way, the timing and so on. And the issue again, we keep on asking this question ever since the Asian financial crisis about the financial safety net, right? A bilateral swap, financial safety net, how important, how relevant is that to be able to be a shock absorber in kind of the volatility that we expect probably will increase rather than decrease. Okay, I think exactly 15 minutes, right?
Yes,
Thank you.
Very much.